Thank you, Daniel. Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm Nadia Morris. I'm the director of at&t's Connected Health Foundry. It's our global network of innovation centers. We're in Palo Alto, California, Plano, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, where I am, Ra'anana, Israel, and we just opened one in Mexico. And really the idea is we've had at&t Labs for, 150 years now. Labs is really good at long-term R&D invention, right? The Foundry is different. It's about, connecting with startups. That's why we're in the Texas Medical Center's Innovation Institute. It's about collaborating with them, finding things that they're great at and things that we're great at, which is connectivity, security, cloud, and honestly, looking for solutions. We're one of the largest self-insured companies, seeing how we can improve our employees' health. We've got, just shy of 300,000 people that currently work for the company, plus retirees that we take care of. So, yeah, thanks everybody. I'd like to introduce this amazing panel that has, I always feel so humbled. You guys are so much of me, but smarter than I am, good Lord. I'll introduce my name and then ask folks to kind of tell them a little bit about themselves. So to my right, Esther Dyson, tell me about yourself.
Okay, it's long and complicated, so I'll cut to the chase. I'm the executive founder of a 10-year nonprofit project called The Way to Wellville, which is focused on keeping people healthy and food, diet, early childhood, stuff like that, very far from cancer. But the reason this is of interest even to cancer experts is the outcomes for cancer and also for almost anything else that happens to you, dementia or anything is made worse by having diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, all these other things. It's sort of like an adjuvant is a medicine that makes things work better, and all these chronic non-communicable diseases, including the mental problems that make people not be able to engage in, quote, healthy behaviors, make the outcomes of all these other things worse. So I don't know if you want me to go on the other stuff, or I'll do that later.
I'll prod you later.
Okay, great.
And directly to our right, Rob King from the American Cancer Society.
Thank you. So I'm Rob King with the American Cancer Society, and I lead enterprise planning for the society. We've been through quite a bit of change in the past several years. And really what all that means is I get to work with some pretty incredible, brilliant minds, both on our staff and our volunteers, as we really think about from bench to bedside to community, what is the role of the American Cancer Society and NGOs in general, and so that's the work that I'm doing.
Excellent, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Sue Siegel from GE Ventures.
Thank you, although I'm 4'11", so if you would say least from a height perspective. And if you can tell right now, I can't touch the floor and the back of the chair at the same time. It's actually a challenge. I'm Sue Siegel. I am Chief Innovation Officer at GE, which is a recently created position over the last few months. And I've been CEO of GE Ventures. I came to GE about 5 years ago after about 30 years of doing a whole bunch of different things in different companies. But one thing that sort of threads all the way along for me is a real passion for the world of disruption and breakthroughs, and being able to figure out what might be possible in terms of bringing those solutions to the marketplace. So I've had that sort of blessing and privilege, to be frank, and then to work with some pretty incredible teams to make them actually come to fruition. I was CEO of GE Ventures for the last 5 years, and in that process, we invested in about 100 companies and have had a number of exits. I'm pleased about that. And then also created an incubator, which is all about new business formation. And that's something that I've been really, really excited about doing, because it's really bringing a whole bunch of different assets together that come out of GE and creating solutions in many, many different marketplaces. So that's what I'm doing right now.
All right, excellent, thank you. So Esther, can I pick on you first?
Okay.
All right.
Does she have a choice?
So when we spoke earlier, I told you that Esther, by the way, is on the board, right, of 23andMe, which I think is just great. One thing that I thought was amazing about it was, like, with a couple clicks of a mouse, you can share your genome for research purposes. You can download your SNPs and, like I did, upload it to GitHub or share it for research purposes. But and the advances that we can have from sharing this data, it's amazing. But like health records, like we talked about earlier, they're incompatible with each other.
Yes.
Tell me about, what do you think about that?
Well, so obviously I had 23andMe done, not just for myself, but for 26 family members. I also got a full genome from the Personal Genome Project. And it is so much easier to get your genome than it is to get your health records. And the genomes by themselves are pretty useless unless you also have the other data about what happened to the person, what kind, we need a lot more data before we know what the genome means. Right now, we kind of have a glossary for a few little subsets, and what we need is a full dictionary, and we need like a Russian novel and then the English translation. And right now we've got the Russian novel, which is your genome, but we don't have the English translation for most people. So lots of work to do on that.
Excellent. Yeah, like I was trying to explain it to somebody. I'm a software developer, by the way, so I learn more about healthcare every single day. And I was explaining to somebody that if like us nerds had not agreed on how to exchange data easily, none of you could send emojis, right? Because somebody somewhere decided that like a certain binary sequence equaled like, scratchy head face. And like it seems so obvious to nerds, but like we need that for healthcare.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that all of you are helping us drive to that. So anybody else want to talk about that, or I'll move?
I'm a huge believer in what the world of genetics and genomics can do, and the notion of being able to see not what is predestined, but frankly, what is a blueprint that will get affected over time. And I think most importantly, and Esther's been a real pioneer in this, is this notion of democratizing data, particularly as it relates to something so personal like the genome. And Esther can, and I'll let you talk about the PGP and what you've done there and how fantastic that is. But that is something that I think could fundamentally help us change healthcare. And there is this notion that it's all about HIPAA that doesn't let us do it, or other types of what you might call fears as it relates to discrimination, et cetera. But the reality is, particularly in this next generation, this notion of privacy and protection it's more important on the financial end than it is on the genetic end of things, right? So
There's also this other thing, which is, people are worried, oh my gosh, people are going to get their genome and not understand it. No, your genome is not your destiny. It's not a diagnosis. But unless people get their genomes, the ones who want them, and start to understand them, it's like, this is how you get educated. People can do amazing things with baseball statistics, and they understand the difference between a batting average and, it doesn't mean you're going to win next season or whatever. They can start to figure this out about their own genomes, and the best way to learn stuff is your own genome, not out of some textbook that's really boring.
I can agree.
Now, obviously, just from our perspective, community game side, we're trying to figure out, what is our role in this new space? We've historically not been in the treatment and treatment guideline space, but we have a close connection to providers and patients. And so this idea of how do you drive education? How do you drive a culture of data sharing, but so that we can continue this movement? So definitely something we're also thinking about.
Excellent. Well, before I move, this whole topic just fascinates me. So how do we change it? Is it something that needs to be legislated? Is it something that the doctors need to pressure the EHR vendors, or how do we change it?
Yes.
Yes,
All of the above?
And just, time and more people using their genomes and finding out interesting information, whether it's your family connections or, just understanding what risk means. For example, I have, at 50, I have double the risk of Alzheimer's because I have one ApoE. It sounds awful, but so my risk is about 14% versus 8%. It's still really low, and I can lower that risk further by walking from 1701 Trinity Street down to here in the sun, by sleeping more, which unfortunately I did not do, but understanding that. So I always like to joke, you can reduce your risk of breast cancer by going into space.
By what?
Going into space. Because everything's prorated. If your chance of dying in space goes up, then your chance of dying of breast cancer goes down.
Only Esther can say this. It's so true. Can I just answer just a little bit on that point? And that is, the GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, was signed in May of 2008. President Bush actually signed it. And that really did cover discrimination as it related to employment and discrimination as it related to, help me out, somebody might know that. There's two areas. It doesn't cover all of the things associated to
Insurance.
addiction. And insurance, thank you.
Not life insurance, but health insurance.
Health insurance. So, and there's still areas that we actually have to your question, get more protections around, no doubt, because you don't want the issue of discriminatory behavior or advantage because of economic type of issues overall. So there's a lot of that, but I agree with Esther in the notion of the more people use it and find utility from it on any of the data, be it genetics, be it any of the data that we potentially can learn from a health perspective, the better off we're going to be, and the more we're going to demand some of those protections overall.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky. I was one of the early adopters, so I got the full health record. And even though technically, I won't mention my doctor's name, but he took a risk and looked at it, even though technically he maybe wasn't supposed to.
Well, if you gave it to him, it was fine.
Exactly. Well, no, there was a hospital policy.
Oh, okay, I see. Got it.
And he saw that I had a family history, and my record said that I had a 25% increased risk of heart failure. And that day, he started me on meds for it, and I think it may save my life. So fingers crossed. Moving on. Investing. So, Rob, when we talked, I know I was going to jump the gun, but you're just now starting your program. So tell me about initiative and what your kind of strategy is around.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about ACS research, just to kind of provide a little context. So we've been funding cancer research since the 1940s, about $4.6 billion. And at any point in time, we have probably between, I'd say, $400 and $500 million of active grants. And a big focus of ours has been more basic discovery science with a specific emphasis on young investigators. And that's really a gap that we've been playing for quite a while now. And we sort of...
Excuse me, they can't hear you. Just move it up. Sorry. I think it's under your collar. Just hold it in front of your...
No, it's not on.
Oh.
Is it on?
If it's not on, I'll lend you mine.
Can you hear me now? So we can make this work. This is all about innovation. Thank you, Esther.
In software, we call that agile methodology.
There you go. So I have no idea what I was talking about. No, so ACS Research, we have a long history of cancer research since the 1940s. I said $4.6 billion. At any point in time, we have anywhere from, let's say, $300 to $400 million in active grants, a big focus in discovery science with a big focus in young investigators. And that's not going to go away. We're going to continue that. And in fact, through the the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, we've made a public commitment to doubling our annual cancer research funding, which would take us over $200 million a year. And so we are looking for opportunities to really expand the way we look and think about research. And what we've realized is we have this vast network of researchers, peer reviewers, professors, other partners that we've not really tapped into in ways that we could. And so that's led us to the development, and we're, again, very early on in developing ACS Bright Edge Ventures. And so it's a philanthropic approach to venture, so looking for donor investors to partner with us, and then looking for opportunities to be value-add partners in the venture space. We think we have some interesting resources and knowledge and tools that we can add value to, so we're really excited about that.
Very cool. Well, when our startups, you'll get a trial run on these guys when they do their pitches. Speaking of MS, and Sue, you work for a ginormous company like I do, and I meet with, probably, I think the last count we did about 250 startup pitches last year, and we're always cognizant of like trying to find that sweet spot to engage with. So how do you balance like the right time to not get in the way but be super helpful and
Yeah. So last year,
I'm really just looking for advice.
glad to give it to you. Actually, it doesn't mean we're right. So first of all, I have to say something about G Ventures. G Ventures invests across the board on everything GE does. So it's healthcare, energy, transportation, advanced manufacturing, software. Are you still with me? And my passion is healthcare. I mean, let's be clear, but I can't show that all the time amongst all our portfolio companies because you're not allowed to pick favorites. That said, we look at about 3,000 to 4,000 companies a year. It gives you a sense because we got a big team and fairly insistent about learning as much as we possibly can from the likes of these incredible entrepreneurs. And the question of how do you pick and then how do you help versus smother, I think for every big company and every startup, the question of when you bring strategics or corporates into the equation and get that kind of balance is always one that everyone sort of tries to understand. And for us, it's been, I have to say, a learning process. And one of the things, having come from the venture capital world myself beforehand, I was fairly insistent and understood the reticence of both entrepreneurs and other financial VC firms to have the likes of corporates in the funding rounds until fairly late in the game, like a Series C, Stage C sort of company. And in order to make sure that we participate appropriately, you've got to create the systems and the processes similar to the venture capital world and allow the kind of decision making to be just as fast and understand where the friction points and the tension are as it relates to what the startup wants and what the venture capitalists want and what a corporate wants. And then what we try to do as best as we possibly can is figure out where we can be helpful. And one of the things that we've started to apply, well, from the very beginning, we created a program, which at the time we called EDGE, but with Edge Computing, we've had to change the name. But it was all around trying to figure out what can we do for our startups versus what can startups do for us. And that was very much sort of the mentality that we've tried to take into place and to use the kind of scale and resources that you can bring to the equation. And I could go on for a long time, but other people are on the stage, so I'll stop.
No, thanks. I really appreciate it. And I think it's really great for the startups to know, don't be scared of the big companies. We want to help. Or how they can help us.
Find your spot, though. I mean, you guys know this, right? That's the biggest thing. It's if you don't find your Sherpa that's really going to be an advocate for you, particularly in big companies, it's hard. And don't take it personally, it's purely hard. And so if you find the right Sherpa that truly understands what you're offering with what the potential business unit within the company can use, it's really, really helpful and you don't end up getting as frustrated in that process. That's the one thing I would say most importantly.
All right, one thing I've got to ask this. So from October 2008 to March of 2009, you did not live here. You lived right outside of Mexico.
Moscow.
Can't read my own handwriting. You were training to be a cosmonaut, and you learned something really interesting.
Yeah, so, let's see, is there a button here on? Here, I'll take it back.
It's
So,
on there.
For 6 months, I trained as a cosmonaut in Russia, and there were basically two things we learned about. It was space medicine and space plumbing. There was a lot of medical stuff, because basically you're sending human bodies up into a really strange environment, and there are no doctors up there, and not a lot of medical equipment, so they inspect everything, even though they do it with very old equipment. And unlike dying of breast cancer, this training saved my life, because they found that I had Barrett's esophagus, which has about and this is a story, I don't mind talking about the cancer, but it always needs to be carefully said. So Barrett's esophagus gives you about a 1% chance per year of moving on into cancer of the esophagus, which is very, very rarely diagnosed until you start having swallowing problems, and at stage 4, and usually die pretty soon. It's, whenever I mention it to people who know, it's like, oh. But I was being checked every year, and in I think 2014, my gastroenterologist was really angry with me because I hadn't been taking the omeprazole. I said, "You've got cancer, you have to go." Anyway, it's a really troubling story to me, because the false positives you get, I mean, I had a 1 in 100% chance of moving on to cancer. It wasn't foreordained. I was extremely unlucky. I was 1 out of 100. On the other hand, I was extremely lucky. I was 1 out of probably millions who actually got checked in time to be known that they were at risk in getting those annual checkups. But because they found it early, it's a longer story. You can find it on Thrive Global under Second Opinion. Believe me, if you never told me I had cancer of the esophagus, I would never have known.
Wow.
But I knew a lot about all the pains of dealing with the healthcare system, the faxes, the different hospitals, the insurance companies, whatever. But it sort of teaches you a lot about statistics, because the fact that you got it doesn't mean you were high risk. It just means you were the 1 out of the 100 that actually did progress to cancer that year. And the moral is not everybody should get a gastroendoscopy every year. The moral is it's still about luck, but we do need a better system. I'll leave it at that.
And I always tell people, I'm a math nerd, so probability is one of my obsessions. And when we talked, you were saying that you're not that you're not interested, but you're more about investing in health and not preventative care, right?
Oh, okay. So when we talk about preventing poverty, we don't actually talk about that. We talk about economic development. And I'm trying to talk about health in the same way. I don't talk about preventing disease, but about investing in health, which is an asset. It improves people's productivity. It improves their lives. It improves their chances of surviving cancer or getting a good outcome. And it's an asset. Health care is spending to fix something that went wrong. But health is an asset that prevents things from going wrong.
So Rob, from the ACS, we're just driving poor AV people crazy, I'm sorry. The ACS has a long, great tradition of informing and helping people with prevention. So what are your thoughts on investing in health?
Yeah, I love what you said. It makes a lot of sense. And you're right, ACS has quite a bit of history in prevention, early detection. And as we think about our work going forward, you're going to continue to see us focus on things like colorectal screening, because we know we can save a lot of lives, HPV vaccination, We can eliminate, I think it's almost 90% of all HPV-related cancers through this vaccination. So we're driving it. Things like how do we ensure access to quality care, especially for the most vulnerable populations? So we're focused on things like transportation and lodging, and we're exploring a couple other areas that really make an impact in terms of access. But we're also beginning to look at things, this idea around healthy communities and specifically the social determinants of health. And we've got a couple of pilots focused there as well because we recognize that it's so much more complex, right? And then Daniel actually mentioned something in the earlier sessions where we're trying to figure out how to branch out and explore and work in new ways. And so we're partnering with XPRIZE Foundation on exploring this Global Cancer XPRIZE, which is focused on early detection as well. So lots of interesting things happening.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And Sue, I see a lot of like amazing devices come through the cohort twice a year for early detection of things. Is that an area that y'all are actively looking at?
Yeah, I mean, GE Healthcare in particular is one of the biggest diagnostic companies in the world, right? So, and you might imagine we span so many different technologies in terms of diagnostics, and it goes from imaging all the way through to sensing devices, EEGs, EKGs, et cetera, and all the way through to monitoring, et cetera. So when we look at various devices, one thing I will say is there's a device for everything now, and it doesn't mean the device necessarily is useful in the health system. And what I really encourage folks to look at is you can't just make it the best science. That's sort of a given. It really has to be both accessible from a cost perspective. So everything has to be affordable. I think we all know this now. And so figuring out your health economic benefit as you are really looking at your devices and you're looking at your solution is ever so important. And then the last thing that I think, as you're really thinking about the medical device area, is, and anything in healthcare actually, is going to be all about the underpinning of the patient experience and the provider experience. So, in every single aspect of our lives, we've gotten very used to the convenience of an iPhone or other types of PDAs. And tap and swipe just comes very naturally to us, and it's just convenient. But why is that not the case so much in the world of health or in our enterprises? And the expectation is it's going to be more and more, because it doesn't come down just to an app. It comes down to bringing the complexity together to really make it so. And anytime you're designing, particularly a device, try to figure out how you build it into either the convenience and in a user experience for the individual, be it the patient or the consumer, and or the provider system. Super, super important.
I think when I first started working in healthcare, somebody told me you could change anything but the workflow.
Still kind of true.
Well, that was exactly 2 years ago. So yeah, that's true. Is this Q&A? Yeah.
We can start?
Yes. All right, audience Q&A. Anybody have some questions for our esteemed panelists?
Can I ask here? Hi. Well, good evening. I'm starting now. I'm from Brazil, and we're starting an early detection cancer prevention pilot project. So my question is, we need to train the providers because we are talking about blood cells cancer, so we don't have any specific symptoms. So have you seen something really interesting into training the trainers and the providers to make people aware about the signs and symptoms?
I'll go. I can say that's, so I don't have an answer for you other than we are absolutely thinking about that. And, we're as this idea of early detection and these technologies, there's always the concern of, okay, what do you do, right? Overdiagnosis and all of these concerns we have from a patient perspective. So we're certainly thinking about what our role is and how we can drive that education.
Maybe you should just shout.
Circling back to the genomics question.
It's on. That's what he said. Is it on? Turn the.
Hello? Sorry, thanks so much for the discussion. Just wanted to circle back to the genomics question. The independent initiatives like 23andMe and some other companies over the last sort of 5-6 years or so have given people, individuals, sort of in communities, access to such a data-rich and powerful sort of information tool. But the incongruence between the level of access to such a data-rich piece of information and then the electronic health record is obviously the bridge and the trust gap that exists in the marketplace right now. Who do you see is going to be responsible for linking those two systems? Is it the incumbents, or is it going to have to be something that's disruptive and clawing out the data from both sort of farms as such?
I think it's probably, thank you. It's probably going to be, I mean, right now, there are probably 10 startups doing that. That's the problem. There are 10 of them. They don't have enough access. They don't have critical mass. Over time, 1 or 2 will emerge. They'll probably be acquired by an incumbent. And you know, the world will morph, and some of the incumbents will disappear, and maybe, you know, a smaller incumbent like an Athena or somebody else will become much bigger.
Is
Yeah,
there
I
a market at play?
No, please, go ahead. I mean, who is responsible was your question. And I thought, I hope somebody else goes first, because that's a tough one to answer, right? I think what's happening is the provider systems are learning very quickly that in order to maintain the type of advances and or keep their critically, this is particularly the advanced medical centers, right? They have to take into account this kind of possibility. I'll give you one example. So GE Healthcare is participating with Partners Healthcare in trying to do exactly what you're talking about. And it's really hard. And it's even within their own system. This is Partners Healthcare. And remember, they've got McLean's and they've got MGH and Brigham and Women and all these various types of hospital systems. And they have to get down to one patient, one hospital, one system, and make them all interoperable. So it has to start, first and foremost, I think, at the system level. I don't think you can really get the consumer to think they're going to be able to do it, although they can demand it more and more. And I think that when you look at who will really drive this in terms of, is it an Epic, is it a Cerner, is it an Athena Health, et cetera, I think they're all looking to figure out how they might make this more accessible. But they're not, I'm not sure they're responsible either. So no one is responsible, and so you sit there and say, well then, isn't that where government comes into play? And that's certainly what the ONC has been trying to do with what happened with electronic health records, but we're still not there. So that's why I avoided answering the question, because it is one that I think is absolutely key. I think there's a lot of startups trying. It's a huge, huge challenge to actually make happen.
And the challenge is not just technical. It's, you know, people still using fax systems, hospitals charging for this.
So true. So true.
At Memorial Sloan Kettering, you have to fax your request, and they give you a number, and I tried it. It was busy for 2 days, and then I called, and they said, oh, that's the number that's always busy. Here's the number you should use. Swear.
One of the things that I always harp on the standards thing. I think one of the challenges was that EHRs were mandated, right? Before there was a standard set in place. So you had all of these people creating, I look at it, I know this dates me, but it's like you're stuck with kind of Microsoft Word in the 90s, right? You have like all these proprietary systems but you're legally mandated to use them to get reimbursed, right? So I think it's going to take that to fix it, honestly.
Yep.
Well, with that, on to. Thanks very much to the panel. They're going to stay here and be asking questions next of our 7 amazing startups. I think to kind of close out this piece, the bottom line for any solution in cancer or any healthcare realm is that it's not just the technology, it's the system, it's how the patients or the nurse or the caregiver and the reimbursement and the policy levels, some of which are local like politics, so you can't always build a solution that works in Austin that might work in Bangladesh or New York City. So lots of challenges, but opportunities to connect the dots. So now we're going to go in here from 7 really pretty incredible fast-moving companies that are building solutions that address different elements of cancer, from prevention to diagnostics to therapy to clinical trials. And first up, they're each going to have 1 minute, and then they're going to cycle off and we have questions at the end. First up is Susan Bratton from Saber Health. Do you have a microphone? We'll hand off that one. And you go over there, and we'll hear from
Great,
Saber
thank
Health.
you. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Bratton, and I'm the founder and CEO of Saver Health. For cancer patients, their caregivers, and healthcare enterprises, Saver Health is a scalable, evidence-based, personalized nutrition support and engagement platform that, based on evidence-based research, can improve clinical and quality of life outcomes, increase therapy adherence and compliance, reduce healthcare spending, and empower patients to take control over their disease. Up to 80% of cancer patients experience nutritional issues. Malnutrition is the #2 secondary diagnosis, and 1/3 of all cancer deaths are due to severe malnutrition. Saver Health provides clinically appropriate, highly personalized nutrition recommendations based on evidence-based science, the clinical best practices of oncology-credentialed medical professionals, and unique patient data. And our patent-pending technology platform is a deep learning system that leverages multiple coaching dialogues developed by our clinical expert team and delivered through Ina, our intelligent nutrition assistant. Saver Health's solution is a SaaS solution. It can be licensed on a branded or white-labeled basis. And today, our primary customers are pharmaceutical companies such as Merck, Celgene, and Pfizer. Thank you. Staying for questions? Or?
We'll do questions at the
Okay.
end. I'm just going to say it's a really interesting thing. Awesome. Remember, food is a drug, and even everything from your gut microbiome to your genome impacts what food you may want for prevention or for therapy. Next up is Arteris and Fabian Beckers, who I'm lucky to know. Full disclosure, one of his early advisors, and GE Ventures is one of their investors. A great story you'll hear about startup to real scale.
Thank you, Daniel. My name is Fabian Beckers. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arteris, and we do AI for medical imaging. So medical imaging is really part of the problem. It's a huge piece of the clinical care of the patient, and it's so arcane. It's so poor that there's studies showing that 1/3, 25 to 30% of medical imaging cases are misread. If you imagine how is that impacting the treatment care path around the world, is amazing. It has to be solved. And so our mission and our goal for the last 5 years is to really bring data-driven medicine and quantitative medicine to healthcare and democratize the best care across the world. What is a dream? The dream is you send the images to the cloud, you have AI behind the scene to help the physician, all the data is put to work, physician can share the data across the world to the best expert, and researcher can access far more data than images and text data to really make quantum leeway into healthcare and research. Well, that's what we've built or started building in medical imaging. So we have a first FDA-cleared cloud AI solution. We've done 25,000 patients. We're live in 100 hospitals, 150 physicians that use Arteris every day. And we're very proud to have helped patients with heart disease, heart defects. And now, 2 weeks ago, we got a very broad FDA clearance for oncology and to change it. The next piece is entering predictive and really try to bring down not just medical images, but also text data together to really inform on one single system the care path of the patient. And we think that will change also cancer path as well, bringing healthcare and physician together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fabian. I think a great example of AI, artificial intelligence, actually moving to IA, intelligence augmentation, not to replace the radiologist, but to augment them. And I think coming to us from down under, is that correct? Dr. Puvian with a great startup called Cancer Aid.
Hi everyone, my name is Nick. I'm the founder and CEO of Cancer Aid. As a radiation oncologist, we developed Cancer Aid 3 years ago to address issues that we saw day to day whilst working in the hospital. We have the #1 cancer app in the world, we're helping 20,000 patients over 53 countries. Our app provides patients with personalized cancer information and treatment information, a personal journal and a symptom journal, and a community allowing patients to connect with others going through similar experiences. Our app is free to patients, and we license symptom journal integration to US health systems. Customers like Cedars-Sinai Hospital receive symptom journal integration for their care teams, and with the potential for patients to actually live longer using our technology. We're the first cancer app to actually integrate into the EMR workflow, and some of the stuff we're doing is quite revolutionary. We're a team of 15, both from Australia and in the US. We've raised $1.9 million of investment to take our product to market and signed up 4 large customers. Feel free to come grab us during the break, and we are happy to show you what we're doing. And if anyone's here from pediatric oncology, we'd love to show you our new pediatric app. Thanks.
Thank you, CancerAid. Definitely the world of apps is connecting patients, doctors, data in new, incredible ways. Next up is Swati, the CEO and founder of Lightsprite. And take it away, Swati.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be back here in Austin. So I'm Swati, founder and CEO of Lightsprite, and we build games to manage chronic health conditions. Our data delivers insights back to clinicians and players. Part of, as you've heard today, part of beating cancer is having strong emotional resilience and mental health. And in fact, when behavioral health is a comorbid condition with cancer, the annual cost of care can increase by tens and thousands of dollars. Our video game, Cinesprite, was the first to win a Surgeon General Award. We're actively recommended in clinics today and trusted by patients at their greatest hour of need. We've also received financial awards from the U.S. Army, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Singularity University, thank you, Daniel, South by Southwest, and the Livestrong Foundation. So we have clinical validation, and we're reimbursed today. So if you're interested in learning about how to deliver cost-effective, truly patient-centered care that patients trust and also heals their soul at the same time, come talk to us. Games get people engaged. Engaged people get better faster.
Awesome, thanks. Swati was one of the 50 amazing startups at our Exponential Medicine Conference in November, so come join us there, right? Next up, coming from the Holy Land, Israel, a company called Medivisor, and Tal Gavoli can tell us about it. Tal.
So when people are told that they have cancer, it's obviously a terrible experience, but they're not given a lot of information from their healthcare teams. Really what happens is that they go home and hit Dr. Google. And there they're overwhelmed with repetitive, irrelevant, outdated, unreliable, incomprehensible, and inconsistent health information. It just doesn't work. What they're looking for is the latest medical science. They hope their doctors know, but the doctors can't keep up either. Last year there were 20,000 research papers published just on breast cancer, and today there are 1,688 open interventional recruiting clinical trials for breast cancer. They don't have the tools, technology, or motivation sometimes even to find the best treatment for each patient. Medivisor brings every person the latest cutting-edge medical science that's personally and clinically relevant to them. We use AI and machine learning and semantics to comb through the world of information, the research, the clinical trials, the guidelines, warnings, and more. Figure out what of that is of clinical relevance and to whom, and deliver it to them and their care team in language they could understand, empowering them to make well-informed decisions about their health. We're already helping over 100,000 subscribers, to which we get to through over 50 locations being distributed in the US by the likes of New York Presbyterian Hospital, Mount Sinai, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and more. So come talk to me more to see how we could integrate this into healthcare teams, nonprofits, and how we help biopharma to reach hard-to-find patients for their clinical trials, for example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tal. I'll actually try out their software and get the emails, and the app is really useful. Next from Rang Medical is Ron.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Rong. I'm here with Ring Medical. Fever occurs at high rate in patients with chemotherapy-induced neutropenia and is considered a medical emergency. Fever may be the only sign of infection after discharge and need to be addressed immediately. However, there is a care gap between providers and patient to remotely monitor their temperature. at&t is a wearable thermometer with FDA 510(k) clearance and continuously transmit body temperature data via Bluetooth. It is the only medical-grade wearable thermometer that has clinical validation for core temperature monitoring and has the biggest database of more than 1.2 million hours of fever data. at&t enables the early detection of neutropenic fever and provides remote monitoring through the connected health platform based on the at&t M2X.
Awesome. And I know thank you. I know as an oncologist, you spend a lot of time on the phone, fever, neutropenia, a lot of cost and other issues with folks who have that issue. So great proactive connected health platform. And last up is SenseTech.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irene Brinker, CEO and co-founder of SenseTech. Also, I should add to that resume, cancer survivor. We have a product. This is the world's first fully autonomous, meaning it doesn't require a second hand or any other action electrocardiogram and heart rate variability monitor for one limb. Now, based off of my experiences, while I was going through treatment and every single doctor telling me, a very type A personality, you should really, you should really monitor your stress levels. That's going to be very important for you. Of course, being someone who likes to quantify things, my response to them was, okay, how? And there wasn't really a very good way to do that. Every conversation basically ended up with them sending me to yoga, right? And even then, I was like, I don't know if it works. Is it working? And that was a source of stress for me. So the consumer band uses that ECG data to read heart rate variability, because I'm sure I am not the only crazy person out there. We have a stress calendar, and these lines show people when you're at high point of stress, you can literally take a couple of actions, sometimes as little as a couple of deep breaths, to actually bring that stress level down and keep yourself out of fight or flight and allow your body to actually heal. Now, on top of this technology, we've also developed, currently in prototype phase, a constant blood pressure, blood oxygen saturation level monitor. We're working on a core temperature monitor also within one wearable. We have a remote monitoring platform assigned to that, but specifically for cancer, I want every single cancer patient to be able to have a tool that I felt I really needed that wasn't there. And that's what we have right here. Thank you.
Awesome. That could be useful for the caregivers too. A lot of issues with burnout and
yes, we'd like to test that too.
So now we've got the last 10 minutes. Actually, let's bring up all the amazing startups over here, and the panel can throw any and all questions towards them. Share the mic, and let's have a kind of fun, robust discussion. I think maybe just stand in front of the screen. I think that'll kind of work it out best. Anyone on the panel want to?
So I'll go on CancerAid, if maybe you can help me.
Question for CancerAid.
Yeah, and the question is, I was trying to understand your business model, because you've done a lot, clearly.
Yep.
So what is the business model, revenue model overall?
So you won't get that in 1 minute. So our app is free. We license symptom journal integration to US health systems. So customers like Cedars-Sinai pay for symptom journal tracking from a patient's device directly into their EMR workflow, such as Epic. So the reason why that's very important is that ASCO, the largest cancer conference in the world last year, it was the first randomized controlled trial which showed a survival benefit of 5.5 months. It was a simple tool, not commercially available, symptom journal, which we've had in our app for 3 years actually. So we are actually the first cancer app to actually do that integration. But why it's very important is we can reduce costs, improve patient satisfaction, and ultimately, patients can actually live longer.
So it's a freemium outcomes model. When do you get paid?
So customers like US health systems pay us $15,000 per month for the symptom journal integration.
Okay, so it is an integration model.
Yeah,
Okay,
we've got
all right.
$500K in annualized recurring revenue already. What we want to do is find more US health systems if they're here today, show them what we're doing, because we've got patients at 80 of the top 200 cancer hospitals already using our app, and we'd like to show how the care teams can benefit.
That's great, thank you.
So for SenseTech, what actual things do you measure, and then what does it do? Does it warn you you're getting too stressed, or just a little more how it works?
Sure, absolutely. So the consumer device, we are self-funded and crowd-funded through manufacturing and delivery to over 2,000 clients at this point, but we are just delivering right now. I've been wearing it for several months, and it fits the bill. So one of the things that it reads that people seem to find very interesting on the consumer side is emotions. So I'm constantly finding myself checking that as kind of like habitual.
What does it measure?
It measures electrocardiogram. So it's ECG. And then it uses that ECG data because from this one little device, we're actually getting 19 different data points to calculate heart rate variability, which is essentially like a window. We've chosen for the consumer app to use that data to read stress levels, recovery rates, emotions. We have a line in here that we're calling vitality because every consumer can understand that their vitality is like their energy. But in reality, that's the autonomic nervous system. If it's low, it's probably a bad time for you to work out and such. Your food isn't digesting very well if you just
It's basically HRV
then. So it's ECG that we're measuring, and from that, we're calculating the HRV. Now, the future generation, we already have a working prototype as well that also has blood pressure, blood oxygen saturation. We're working on a partnership to bring in core temperature. So that will be ECG, blood pressure, blood oxygen, core temperature. We also have a remote monitoring platform. Right now it's a little bit different, but it's a little bit bigger. But we won the Silver Hammer Award with Fraunhofer, and so blessing above blessings, we get 2 weeks with their engineers actually helping us figure out how to miniaturize it. At this point, that's more of a question of funding to send my team there. But we're that's what it is. Our chief medical officer, everyone.
But just to show everyone the new generation device, and it's a prototype, so it's like a very ugly one, but it's not significantly better than the other one.
It looks like a Disney cast.
Yeah, at the moment.
And you get front and rides, yeah.
Yes, hopefully changing soon.
Rob?
So we've heard from several app-based innovations and technologies, which is it's really cool to see a lot of this. So maybe this is maybe for several, and I'm going to get all the names mixed up, but the game-based, and there's nutrition. Can you talk a little bit about, so everyone's going about it a little bit differently in terms of who your customer and how you're being paid in terms of either health systems or pharmaceutical industry, but how are you, it's an app, right? And we know how folks interact with apps. How are we creating stickiness with those patients to keep them coming back? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a big differentiator for us is using the gaming platform. So one thing that we always talk about is we're gaming things, we're not doing gamification. So that's part of our core value that we're bringing to the health system. Because as you know, patient engagement is very, very difficult. And gaming has shown to show sustained engagement over time, but it's gaming, not gamification. So we're able to show through standard mobile metrics that we track just like a mobile game, actually. So we show them data. We also show clinical outcomes as well, and then we have publications. So in fact, we have a publication coming out at JIMR. The Ohio State School of Pharmacy analyzed our beta data, and they found a correlation between usage and symptom improvement. So it's a variety of things, and then we also look at qualitative feedback from the players themselves, and people have said men with PTSD, women with bipolar, manic depression, ages in the mid-40s, saying that it's life-changing for them. And this is only after 3 weeks of use of the app. We've had people use it for over 2.5 years. And those are typically what we're finding is people with more severe symptoms, so it's generally the higher cost and more difficult to reach population. So that's how we do it, and then we derive value from the health systems because we're able to show we're delivering what they need.
And how do you really think about customer acquisition? What's your strategy there?
customer acquisition for us right now, we're moving into commercial sales, and where we're seeing a lot of demand is, interestingly enough, in the place where healthcare is growing the most, which is in the Medicaid population. That's where if you look at where the growth has been, and those are very hard to treat, traditionally hard to motivate populations. So solutions like ours that scale really well and then also meet patients where they are really well suited for those kinds of organizations.
It's an enterprise. So
Yes, we're an enterprise. So we do PM, license model. Eventually, we will expect to go to full risk. We do have reimbursement, so we can do both, outcomes-based as well as fee-for-service. And then we talk to the enterprises to show them how, through the current schedule of CPT codes, how that can be applied through a 12-week course. And we have them in 4 different care settings.
Just, Rob, to your question about engagement and how to keep people coming. So we're a lifelong service because information is endlessly coming, and medical situations and chronic conditions are really chronic, so lifelong. And we basically continue to notify people on a personally adjusting basis of information. And 61% are active on our platform after 12 months from signing up, which is kind of miraculous. And one of the reasons that is the case, it's not an app. Okay, it's basically email notifications, responsive design website, so it's used 54% by people on mobile, but it engages them for the long term because they get exclusively personally relevant, clinically relevant information for them.
So we've got about 2.5 minutes left. I thought maybe a quick round robin. I'll start with Fabian. Short answers. What lessons have you learned that might be applicable to anyone here who wants to innovate in healthcare or cancer? You've had some interesting things getting through the FDA. I don't know, any kind of takeaways, each of you? Something.
Yeah, 2 things. I think one, for sure, reinforcing the point about workflow, and it's so important. If you don't integrate at a hospital level or with a clinical care path, you're doomed. So I think that's really number one. It's not technology, it's really solving a clinical need. And secondly, look at the FDA from day one and not just like 3 years down the road, because it will bite you. And I think that's very, very critical if you want to really impact patients.
Can I just reinforce one thing on that? When as investors, when we look at something, we want to know that you have an FDA strategy from the very beginning if you're going to really show clinical validity, clinical utility. And you don't have to have it from day one in terms of an approval, but you have to have a strategy to actually go about it.
I would say the one thing I've learned, and Nadia pointed out, understand if you're going in and expect a clinician to interface, know workflow, number one, and then number 2, if you're working with a health system, understand reimbursement.
I've learned that there's a lot of great people who can teach us a lot. I'm currently at TMCX, and I have to say, as someone, my medical background is as a patient, right? While we do have co-founders whose medical background, both doctors as well as people who work for pharmaceutical companies, this is a completely different animal coming into the American healthcare system and wanting to work with patients. So what I've learned is that you absolutely have to figure out every single hospital has a completely different path, and you need to follow their path. That's a giant learning for me.
I think as a healthcare product, because this product is also launched in consumer market, we have been sold more than 40,000 units in US and more than 100,000 units worldwide. The reason why we want to introduce this product to the clinical market is because we think it's a good solution at the beginning, and then along the way we got FDA approval, 510K class 2, and that's not enough. That's far way behind how to apply this to real clinical world. That's why we conduct this clinical validation and publish the validation paper end of last year, and then it took us 2 years to really fully prepare to launch this product for the clinical settings.
Well, with that, I want to thank the startups, thank our amazing panel, thank the Connect to End Cancer team, and all of you for coming today for our 3 sessions. And I think the big takeaway is stay connected, connect the dots. It takes a whole village to improve the whole cancer care continuum, and hopefully when we come back next year, we'll have some new strategies and big improvements for all of us. So go out there and create the future. Thanks.